All right, let's move on from what we did yesterday. Had to fight a few viruses. I think it was a worm virus. Let's go to B and investigate irreducible complexity. Which does it point towards? Can evolution handle it? And it's not irreducible, but it's complex. Everybody admits that. Or if it can't, we've got to look to an intelligent designer, or what else? All right. We stopped here. My comment, but have you actually observed a bacterium with a locomotion component in which you replace that component or seen it replaced or different with another functioning component that is similar or identically found in another species that is similar to the first bacterium to see if it functions properly, either for locomotion or for other purposes such as producing toxins? You point out, well, the one producing toxins, not identical, but it does have a function in another species. That's apples and oranges. We want that identical bacterium that has a component in it that provides locomotion. If that same species of bacteria has this component and doesn't have locomotion, how is it going to survive? All kinds of questions. You have to keep looking, provide adequate evidence for your point. Don't say, well, there's one over here that's apples that has this function, and one over there that grows apple trees, and over there is oranges, but that thing grows orange trees. So what's the difference? It's two different things that are similar. So have you actually observed the bacterium with a locomotion component in which you replace that component with another or sort differently, function that is similar or identical found in another species that is to the first bacterium to see if it functions properly either for locomotion or another purpose? Have you found any bacterium without a functioning locomotion component? I think if you did, it would be short-lived. If you have not done any of these things, then your conclusions are pure speculation with no real basis for speculating at all, hence a waste of time. We can't actually repeat, falsify, and observe an evolvement of a species, but we can make some educated guess, speculated educated guesses. But a guess is not necessarily a good one unless it's backed up by some research. Note that an intelligent designer cannot be ruled out in any case because he could have created such functioning components as well to be received by the life forms he created. For just as he created sources of liquid in food, if there is one, and I maintain there is, to have it readily available for the life forms in the environment that it is, he also created other things to utilize in order to sustain itself, like the locomotion and other functions, so he could have created such components for the life forms to receive and place them in such a manner and in such quantities to assist his creation in surviving and multiplying. The question is, have you found any of these components floating around in the environments that the bacteria occupy? And if they don't, speculate further. None of these things have to evolve over time anyway, because it can be made immediately available for the life forms if an intelligent designer created them which to live upon the earth that he created. We haven't ruled out intelligent designer. Even though you say, well, if this evolutionary process creates this over millions of years, then we don't need an intelligent designer. But it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The intelligent designer could do it all at once in a lot shorter time. So when anti-evolutionary arguments, this professor, featuring the bacterial flagellum rose into prominence beginning with 1996 Darwin's Black Box by Behe, they were predicated upon the assertion that each of the protein components of the flagellum were crafted in a single act of design to fit the specific purpose of the flagellum. The flagellum was said to be unevolvable since the entire complex system had to be assembled first in order to reproduce any selectable biological function. Well, if we can't see evolution, if it takes too long, the universe is not up to date or not existent yet, This claim was broadened to include all complex biological systems and asserted further that science would never find an evolutionary pathway to any of these systems. After all, it hadn't so far, which you admit you don't have the details of it. At least according to one of design's principal advocates, there is no publication in the scientific literature and prestigious journals, specialty journals or books that describe how molecular evolution of any real complex biochemical system either did occur or even might have occurred. Well, give me some evidence that that's not true. In this article, you actually do admit, this professor here wrote this article, do admit to not knowing the details of how anything evolved. Living cells, he said, are filled, of course, with complex structures whose detailed evolutionary origins are not known. So you're just taking a shot in the dark. You haven't looked around enough to see if there's some similarities there. Oh, I found that bacterial form there, the life form, and it does not have the locomotion device. Seems to be doing rather well. Or it does, but the components are a little different. You didn't even do that. As many critics of intelligent design have pointed out, that statement is simply false. Consider just, oh no it isn't, as just one example, the Krebs cycle. Now he goes into something new. Okay, well let's see. An intricate biochemical pathway consisting of 9 enzymes and a number of cofactors that occupy center stage in the pathways of cellular metabolism. The Krebs cycle is real, complex, and biochemical. Does it also present a problem for evolution? Apparently yes, according to the authors of the 1996 paper in the Journal of Molecular Evolution, who wrote, the Krebs cycle has been frequently quoted as a key problem in the evolution of living cells, hard to explain by Darwin's natural selection. And you said you don't have the details yet, which you just said up here, right? Whose details, evolutionary origins, are not known. That would include what we look at here. Where intelligent design theorists throw up their hands and declare defeat for evolution. However, these researchers decided to do the hard scientific work of analyzing the components of the cycle and seeing if any of them might have been selected for other biochemical tasks. Who cares? If it was selected for another task, we're not looking at the task at hand. You find it out there, but does it now find evolutionary steps to add to find the task that we're looking at? Because you're comparing apples and oranges again. What they found should be a lesson to anyone who asserts that evolution can only act by direct selection for a final function. No, the final function that was in view was that specific bacteria. You're changing the subject again, apples and oranges. We can look at another bacteria with another function for similar component, but not the same. Okay, well, let's look at that. One thing at a time. In fact, nearly all the proteins of the complex cycle can serve different biochemical purposes within the cell. That's true, but we're looking at one function at a time, making it possible to explain in detail how they evolved. No, it doesn't make it possible. You see it working over here. How did it get to be working like that over there? You're shifting horses in midstream. I think you're shifting the horse to an elephant. Although you stipulate that a number of the components of the Krebs cycle have been observed to participate in different biochemical purposes within the cell or cells, this does not make it possible for you to explain in detail how each one of them evolved in that particular cell. There has to be more information which indicates the progression of that evolution stage by stage, failure by failure, success by success over many, many years, lots of detail which most likely require you to be a very old scientist, maybe billions or millions of years old, because you can't be there to observe it unless you're very old. For evolution by its own self-description is not straightforward progress, but a series of virtually endless failures interspersed with successes here and there until a huge amount of trials, uncountable years go by, and you have some constructive results that you have called random process and natural selection, as well as survival of the fittest. Since both creationism and evolution are faith-based models of how the universe Earth came about, because neither is sufficiently observable in how it came about, to be there as each species evolved or did not evolve successfully, nor repeatable nor falsifiable in order to arrive at sufficient scientific objective data. And since this is evidently a quality of design prevalent everywhere in the universe that is way beyond the imagination and capacity of mankind so far, including by your own admission yourself, then there remains the plausibility of an intelligent designer who created the universe until something better comes along. You're not better yet. See if you can get a little better. Well, when we look at in the Krebs cycle problem, the intermediary stages were also useful, but for different purposes. Oh, there they go. And therefore, its complete design was a very clear case of opportunism. The Krebs cycle was built through the process that Jacob, 1977, called evolution by molecular tinkering, stating that evolution does not produce novelties from scratch. I wouldn't say they did. It works on what already exists. The most novel result of our analysis is seeing how, with minimal new material, evolution created the most important pathway of metabolism, achieving the best chemically possible design. In this case, a chemical engineer who was looking for the best design of the process could not have found a better design than the cycle which works in living cells. But you say other purposes. Let's look at one design at a time. So, this professor remarks, since the paper appeared, a study based on genomic DNA sequences has confirmed the validity of this approach. By contrast, how would intelligent design have approached the Krebs cycle? Using Dembski's calculations as a guide? Well, he hadn't finished them, but he's in the right direction. We would first determine the amino acid sequences of each of the proteins of the cycle, and then calculate the probability of their spontaneous assembly. When this is done, and have you done that? No. An origination probability of less than 10 to 4, how do you know, is the result. Therefore, have you seen that intermediary stage? No. You're just theorizing like Dembski does. Therefore, the result of applying design as a predictive science would have told both groups of researchers that their ultimately successful studies would have been fruitless, since the probability of spontaneous assembly falls below the universal probability bound. So, not enough time. We already know, however, the reason for such calculations fail. They carry a built-in assumption that the component parts of a complex biochemical system have no possible functions beyond the completely assembled system itself. No, there are other functions. Let's look at one possibility at a time, one function at a time. Don't trade horses in midstream, go to an elephant and an ocean. They'll both drown. As we have seen, the assumption is false. The Krebs cycle researchers knew better. Oh, really? Of course, and we were able to produce 2 important studies describing how a real complex biochemical system might have evolved. Might have. The very thing that design theorists once claimed did not exist in the scientific literature. Well, yeah, theories can exist in literature. Let's look at actual components in real life. The failure of design. It is no secret that concepts like irreducible complexity and intelligent design have failed to take the scientific community by storm. Why? Does it have to show success? How often have scientists been successful in reality, but the scientific community hasn't accepted it? Design has not prompted new research studies, new breakthroughs, or novel insights on so much as a single scientific question. That's happened a lot. That doesn't change reality. Design advocates acknowledge this from time to time, but they often claim that this is because the scientific deck is stacked against them. That's usually the case. The Darwinist establishment, and it is an establishment, they say prevents them from getting a foot in the laboratory door. It takes money to do some of these tests. And lots of staff. I would suggest that the real reason for the cold shoulder given design by the scientific community, particularly by life science researchers, is because time and time again its principal scientific claims have turned out to be wrong. You haven't proved them wrong. They may be a little bit wacky. I don't think so. They're in the right direction, not complete, but they haven't been proved wrong. Science is a pragmatic activity, and if your hypothesis doesn't work, it is quickly discarded. No, it can also be quickly discarded because it's not favored by the scientific community. The claim of irreducible complexity for the bacteria flagellum is an obvious example of this, but there are many others. Consider, for example, the intricate cascade of proteins involved in the clotting of vertebrate blood. This has been cited as one of the principal examples of the kind of complexity that evolution